Okay, well, hey, welcome to Gospel Tangents, your best source for Mormon history, science, and theology.
I'm Rick Bennett. I'm excited to have Dr. Jason Olson on the show. Jason is a brand new author of a book called The Burning Book. It's a memoir of his joining the LDS Church from Judaism. So it's a great book. And in fact, we're going to be giving away a copy of The Burning Book. So this copy right here that you can see, just go to gospeltangents.com/contest and sign up. This is for people in the United States only. But I will send you a copy of this, and you can learn more about it. In our conversation, Jason's going to talk about growing up in a mixed faith marriage. One parent was Jewish and one was not, and so we'll find out more about that in our next conversation and how he got introduced to the LDS Church. So you won't want to miss our conversation. Check it out. Welcome to Gospel Tangents, everyone. I'm really excited. This is, we got a second guest from Korea, or maybe technically third because I had two guys on before. So could you go ahead and tell us who you are and why we're talking to you from Korea?
Thank you so much, Rick. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be with you. I am Jason Olson, calling in from Korea. I'm in the Navy, and I'm forward deployed, stationed here in Korea, doing defense diplomacy work. But I'm also the co-author of The Burning Book, a Jewish Mormon memoir, which came out last year in May of 2022. And it details my journey as a young Jewish kid from Scottsdale, Arizona, who encountered the Book of Mormon, and a play on words, but I had an experience with the Book of Mormon that was revelatory and that changed the course of my life, and it's something that I'm hoping to chat with you about today.
Yeah, it sounds great. So you're kind of a Moses with the burning bush, right? The burning book?
Well, not to the degree of Moses, but the experience of a voice speaking to you from something that is burning, whether it's spiritual or metaphorical, and also short to be revealed what I almost did to the Book of Mormon, and how God spoke to me through the book, through its words and through my experience with it.
Well, very cool. So I'm excited. I've got the Burning Book here. I've actually got an extra copy. I wish you lived a little closer so I could get you to autograph it. But I'm going to be giving away one of these to one of my listeners. We're going to have a drawing here, and you're going to get a copy of Jason's awesome book. So why don't you tell us why you wrote this book and growing up in Arizona?
Sure. Thanks, Rick. Reason I wrote this book with my co-author James Goldberg, an old friend and a poet and a novelist in his own right, is I got a call about 2 years ago in 2020 from the mission president who had presided over the mission where I was baptized. His name's Tracy Watson, wonderful man that I've kept in touch with all these years. And he called me and he said, hey, some of the church leaders, he didn't tell me who at the time, he said, asked for some stories about the Book of Mormon and that they want to share in General Conference. And I said, oh, okay, cool. And he said, I sent this apostle a copy of your story that you gave when you were 18 years old, when you were just newly a member of the church, and he wants to share your story in General Conference. And I said, okay, cool. Which apostle is it? He said, oh, it's Elder D. Todd Christofferson. And I said, oh, wow, okay. And he said, would you be comfortable with him sharing your story in General Conference? And I said, yeah, sure. What does he need? So he said, okay, his office will be in touch with you, and he wants to do it. He's already written it into his General Conference talk about your story. And so it was a version that I had told when I was 18 years old, just I gave a fireside at my home stake in Scottsdale, Arizona. And so just a couple days before General Conference, I got a phone call, and it was Elder Christofferson's wonderful assistant, Judy. And she said, "Hey, is this Jason Olson?" I said, "Yes, it is." She said, "Oh, I have Elder D. Todd Christofferson here on the line who wants to speak with you." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And I was looking at my wife, and I was she's like, "Who is it?" I said, "It's Elder Christofferson." And she was like, "Okay." And then he said, "Hi, Jason." And I said, "Hello, Elder Christofferson." He said, I'd like to share your story in General Conference in a few days. Are you okay with that? I wanted to ask you directly. And I said, yes, I'm okay with it. And then he just kind of asked me some questions about my family. So anyway, he shared it, and a lot of my friends reached out to me and who know some of the story, and they were just, kind of freaking out. "Oh my gosh, I heard your name on General Conference, and I heard your story." But then I had felt impressed for a long time to get this down in a whole book format, and that was really the catalyst. And a lot has happened since I was 18 years old and since I was newly baptized, and I wanted to capture that. Most of it is that I came to terms with Judaism and my own Judaism, as you've read in the book now, and my own Jewish identity and having to explore that. And while getting baptized at 18, I made that decision and have been true to it. But I still I spent the first 18 years of my life as a Jewish person, and I had to reconcile with that and engage with that and understand that. And so kind of a lot of the Burning Book is about dealing with those questions and those issues. And I didn't want my 18-year-old self to tell my story for the rest of my life, right? I wanted to be able to, someone with maturity, someone who served a mission, who graduated from Brigham Young University, someone who went to Israel and had immigrated to Israel for a time, someone who received a PhD in Jewish studies, someone who served as a chaplain. I wanted that version of myself to tell the story with the nuance and the complexity, and so that's how we got the book.
Well, very good. So, I have to tell you, so you grew up in a mixed faith household. It sounds like your one parent was Christian and one was Jewish. Is that right?
Yes. So my mother is Jewish, going 100%, going all the way back centuries to the land of Israel, where the Jewish people were forcibly exiled, for those who know their history, by the Romans. And my father is Lutheran, a pretty conservative branch, mostly raised in Missouri Synod Lutheranism. And I'd characterize my father as a Bible-believing Christian, and with obviously a great love for the Jewish people, since he's been married to my mother his entire life, and neither parent has ever considered conversion one way or the other. So they've stayed happily married, but in their own religious traditions, and so that was always something very curious to me. And I like to think that I was raised inside religious pluralism, and I got to see pluralism happen in my own home. It was also compartmentalized in the sense that we celebrated Hanukkah in the family room and Christmas in the living room, and so we had compartmented pluralism in my home, and we literally celebrated different traditions in different rooms. But I saw that pluralism can be done, and people can love each other, and be a family with different religious traditions. And once I had chosen the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, we had to work our way through that as a family to add Mormonism into the pluralism of our family composition. And so I'm grateful for that, and I've learned a lot from my mother and father's religious traditions, and they still influence me, obviously.
Well, and as a kid, that must have been just a gold mine, because you got Christmas presents and you got Hanukkah presents, right? That must have been pretty awesome.
Yeah. I at least get one present a night for Hanukkah, just to have something.
Kind of the 12 days of Christmas, right?
So it was really nice to we'd have different family members give us different presents, but
and you got to celebrate Passover and Easter together, I guess, too, right?
Yeah, same thing. Passover in the kitchen, Easter in the living room. Go to grandma's and hunt for eggs, and then with the Jewish side of the family have a Seder. But I grew up just having a positive feelings about both religions, because they were both in my home. But yeah.
Yeah, that's wild. I will tell you, when I lived in New Hampshire as a kid, we had a kid in our ward, and one parent was LDS and the other parent was Jewish, and I don't remember which was which. Sort of similar to yours, but so he was ordained at age 12 to be a deacon, and then I think half the ward attended his bar mitzvah.
Oh, wow.
At the local synagogue. And so that was pretty cool.
So
that was the one bar mitzvah I've been to. Yeah.
Wow.
So
yeah.
I think he later went on to become the bishop of the ward, I think. So
wow. Yeah.
Good friend.
Would love to
so
meet
I
that
don't know.
guy one day.
His name is Tom Salasco. So Tom, if you're
Okay.
watching this, I don't know if he is, but anyway, really good friend of mine. So I haven't seen him in decades, but anyway.
Well, I'm sure he'd like this book. Yeah.
Yeah, it was fun to read back, because I thought back to Tom and his bar mitzvah, and it was cool. So, well, why don't you tell people a little bit about how you were introduced to the LDS Church?
Sure. So, as a middle schooler in Scottsdale, Arizona, I became best friends with a young man named Shay Owens. And so our friendship story is we had our first and only detention together. So we were in math
you were
class.
Spray painting things, breaking windows. What was this intention about?
It was our life of crime. We were being really unruly in class, in math class it was, and my buddy Shay was a prankster, and he knew just what to do to trigger me. So he would poke me in the back of the neck with a pencil, and just to get me to get a reaction out of me. And so one day in class, I turned around him and I just yelled at him, and I said, "Stop it! I'm sick of you doing this." and Shay was like, "Whoa," because I kind of tried to ignore him, but he was trying to get the reaction. So he finally got it, and the teacher, saw it, and both of you are getting detention. I can't remember. I was, we were like 12 years old, so we both went to detention, and so then we had to sit together. It was just me and him, this Mormon kid and this Jewish kid, and then we started talking, and we actually realized we really liked each other, and we had a lot of things in common. And Shay was this naturally religious guy that, even though he's a prankster, he wanted to be a good kid, and I wanted to be a good kid, and so we just realized we had so much in common. So we became best friends after that, and never really interested in religion. I invited Shay to my bar mitzvah, and he was always very respectful of my Judaism, and he couldn't come to it. But in high school, we continued our friendship, and we added a new friend, Dave Thaxton, who I'm sure will listen to this, and we've all maintained our friendship and became best friends with Dave as well. And it all kind of came to a head freshman year in high school. I went to what's called Hebrew High, which was only twice a week, a Jewish religious class for Latter-day Saint listeners could be thought of as very similar to seminary. And we had a special speaker. He came into the synagogue wearing a Jews for Jesus t-shirt. And it's very big right on his chest. And I was raised in a Reformed Jewish synagogue. We did not believe in Jesus as the Messiah, typical of Judaism in general. And this was the first time a Christian missionary had entered the synagogue, and really the only time. And so in he walked, introduced himself as Mitch, the Jews for Jesus missionary, and he began preaching about Jesus for about 45 minutes. So I listened to what he had to say, and he quoted Isaiah 53, and he quoted other prophecies of the Messiah, and he said something about how the Holy Spirit had told him that 3 kids in the congregation had accepted Jesus into their hearts as the Messiah this day. And I thought to myself, could I be one of them? And I just got so confused. It was extraordinary confusion because I was in my synagogue listening to a missionary and feeling like I was starting to believe. And there was great commotion. Other kids were, pretty angry about this guy being in the synagogue and what he was saying. I was confused and curious. I wasn't angry. I started to feel like some distrust toward the rabbis because, what were they thinking? And so Mitch leaves the synagogue, and I'm in this state of stupor, just not knowing what's going on and what's happening. And people are asking the rabbis questions. Why did you invite this guy? And, I'm going to tell my parents. They're on the board of this synagogue. And in comes another speaker. And the rabbis are preparing us. And, you're going to hear the other point of view. And it's the same guy. It's Mitch, the Jews for Jesus missionary. But he reveals himself, his true identity, as an Orthodox rabbi, Rabbi Tovia Singer of Outreach Judaism. And he's wearing a kippah, a skull cap, and his prayer shawl, talit, and, showing his true identity. And he speaks another 45 minutes explaining to us the deceptive techniques that missionaries will try to use to convert Jewish people to Christianity. And that he was role-playing as Mitch, just to show us what those techniques would look like. And so I was confused to the 100th degree because I had thought that I was beginning to accept Jesus, but then I realized that he was just using those deceptive techniques to play on my emotions and to try to convert me. And so that began this quest that I rejected like all religious authority, and I decided to find the truth on my own. And so, very similar to Joseph Smith's story, which I grew to love because I found so connected to Joseph Smith, was I'm gonna go to the Bible. I'm gonna start studying the Bible as my source of authority. I'm gonna turn to prayer, and I'm gonna figure this out on my own because I felt like I couldn't trust religious leadership for answers. But I was still really connected to Judaism. At the time, I believed it to be true, knew it to be true, had experienced holy times with my bar mitzvah and with the Torah, and but I wanted to really settle the question of the Messiah, and because of this Tovia Singer experience, and I honestly, up until then, I never even thought about the Messiah. I wanted to live a righteous life, a good life, a religious life, a life pleasing to God, but I wasn't really concerned about who the Messiah is up until this Tovia Singer question, because he's challenging me, and of course he's challenging me to prove to myself that Jesus is not the Messiah. So that's what gets with Shay and Dave. Freshman year of high school, we begin sitting at lunch every day together, and we begin having our religious discussions. Quite epic, and colorful, and contentious, I will admit, on my end, because I'm trying to prove to them that I'm right, and we're good enough friends that it's okay. And this is what leads to the point where I'm given a copy of the Book of Mormon, and Dave and Shay decide to write their testimonies in it, and we go. Dave takes me to the library where we can have a little bit more reverence, and that's where he decides to present a copy of the Book of Mormon, because he feels that we're all 14 years old, and he feels that the book can explain his religion a lot better than he can, which for any 14-year-old is absolutely true. And so I very, very reluctantly take the book, and I put it in the bottom of my backpack, and thinking that it's just going to remain there forever until I know what to do with it. So I'll give the story a pause there, but that's how the point of first contact with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints occurs.
Well, that's cool. It's pretty young to be doing missionary work. Can you imagine the roles reversed, or maybe they were? Because were you trying to convert them to Judaism too, or anything?
Well, I wasn't trying to convert them. I was preemptively trying to use my counter-missionary techniques.
You're anti-Mitch, huh?
I was trying to see if I could be a little mini Tovia Singer, and I decided, I got this. I mean, I'm 14 years old. Tovia Singer's, been a rabbi for decades and been to rabbinical school, but I felt, I can counter missionary the missionaries. And I said, I have missionary friends, so, like any bold, aggressive 14-year-old, I just decided to try out the Tovia Singer arguments. Even though, I didn't really trust religious authority so much, I wanted to experiment upon the word, so to speak. And so I figure I would build resistance to the missionaries if I started young. So there's a lot you could pick apart there, but that's how my personality's wired, and I wanted to start talking to the missionaries now, since I knew what I was doing.
Famous last words, right?
Yeah.
Well, cool. So let's talk about your parents' reaction, especially as a 14-year-old. Did they respond positively or negatively? Well,
I hid it from them. So the Book of Mormon was hiding there in my backpack for months. It got really rumpled, and the cover and the pages, because it was, and of course in those days we didn't have tablets for textbooks. We had the traditional textbooks, and they were crushing it, and I felt a little bad about that because I knew that it was scripture from my Latter-day Saint friends. I got so anxious that my parents would find it that I went out to the backyard one night, and in between the garage and the white stucco fence that separated us from our neighbors, it was just a gravelly Scottsdale backyard alley, and I took a lighter, and James and I realized, it's probably the same lighter we used to light Hanukkah candles or Shabbat candles, and which much later on the irony. And I went outside, and I decided I wanted to burn the Book of Mormon because I didn't want my parents, especially my mother, to find that I even had the book. I wanted to really destroy the evidence, and I didn't want to give it back to Shay. I felt like cowardly, or Dave, either one of them. I felt like I'd be cowardly if I gave the book back. So I went to the backyard with the lighter, and Book of Mormon in the left hand, the lighter in the right hand. And as I was about to flick the switch, I felt the Spirit impress upon me, and I felt very gentle, but also firm words, "Do not burn my book." And
my book,
it
huh?
cut me. Yeah, it cut me to the core. I was always a boy of prayer. I was always praying, just very religiously wired. And so at that moment, I knew it was God because I was always talking to him. And so it was the first time that he really talked back to me. And that was it. But I knew that the book I was holding, I didn't know what was in it, but I knew that it was sacred. And whether it contained all the words of God, or just maybe some of his words are in there, I knew I was going to offend him if I burned it. So I began to read it, and I read in secret, and I eventually gained a testimony, and that's a complex process of how I gained a testimony of it. But I began to believe in the title page, that this book is written to show unto the remnant of the house of Israel the great things that the Lord hath done for their fathers, and the covenants of the Lord, that they are not cast off forever, and to the convincing of the Jew and Gentile that Jesus is the Christ, the eternal God, manifesting himself unto all nations. So the bottom line is I began to believe in that, in the title page message. Number one, that I still had a covenant with God, and that Jesus is the Christ. And I kept it secret. I didn't want anybody to know. I eventually let Shay and Dave know that I knew it to be true. And I asked Shay to baptize me, but I wanted to do it in secret because I did not want to change or give up my Jewish identity in any way. I wanted to continue my life as it was. I had already made a covenant renewal as a bar mitzvah, and so I had every intention to keep going with this Jewish life and keep the commandments of the Torah, which I had promised to do. And so I asked Shay can we go to the river, to a lake? I'm reading here in the Book of Mormon that people are getting baptized in lakes. So I know about John the Baptist and the river. Can we just do it very quietly, just you and me? Nobody needs to know. I want to, I want to follow Jesus, secretly and be his disciple. But I can't change my identity, or I had no idea what that would even look like. So Shay said, would love to do that, but because we're 14, 15 years old, you have to get your parents' permission. He went and looked into it, right? So that's what I decided I have to come out, and it was hard, and it was I had to muster the courage, and I didn't know how to do it. How do you do it? How do you ask for something like this? So I just decided to bluntly go for it, and it was with my mom because, I just felt like she's the one who, I needed to talk to about this and what to do. So I came to her and very sheepishly I said, Mom, Shay and Dave have given me a copy of the Book of Mormon. I didn't want to read it. I started to read it, and I know it's true. And I want to follow Jesus, and I want to be baptized, so that I can do so. I have to ask your permission. So, will you let me be baptized? And predictably, her answer was, absolutely not. So, which, as I've reconciled with my own Jewish identity and Judaism, is entirely appropriate. By that time I was probably getting to be more 15. It took me a long time to muster that courage to ask for Mom's permission to be baptized. So, but that she molded over, and obviously wanted to find a way to get me more settled in Judaism, and I was conflicted, right? Because I wanted to be baptized, but I didn't necessarily want to go to church every Sunday. I just wanted the baptism, and then I would continue on in my Jewish life in the synagogue, continue to go to Hebrew high school, continue to to study with the rabbis occasionally, and but my mom felt, which I think wisely so, that she needed to be more aggressive in giving me more Jewish education, which, if I was in her shoes, I would do the same thing. And so she asked if I'd be willing to study with an Orthodox rabbi every week, one-on-one. So I was thrilled with the prospect, so that's what we did. I began studying with this wonderful Orthodox rabbi. We just call him Rabbi Raphael in the book. And I brought all my questions to him, and it was a wonderful time. And it was one-on-one. It was chavruta style study where we would wrestle with the text, and like you would in a yeshiva. And I really enjoyed it, and I loved studying with him, and I loved what I was learning, but all of that couldn't take away that I had this experience with God and the Book of Mormon. I had an encounter with the burning book, and I couldn't deny it, right? Even if I wanted to deny it, I couldn't do it. And so I'm just living these parallel lives at the time, where I'm trying to figure out which what direction I should go.
You're trying to be both a Christian and a Jew.
Yes, and I mean, I'll say this: I worked up the courage to talk to the rabbi, to come out to Rabbi Raphael, say, and he of course knows the whole backstory, because my mom has already told him the backstory of why I'm even studying so aggressively with him. And so Rabbi, you probably already know this, but, it probably took me at least a year of studying with him to, again, sheepishly come out. And so, Rabbi, I love studying with you. I will continue to study with you, number one, but I believe in Jesus. and I thought you should know. And he's like, Jason, I know all about it. It's okay. Tell me what you believe. And so we looked at Matthew 5, and I wanted to I didn't want to jump into everything. I said, so Rabbi, Jesus says in Matthew 5 that think not that I am come to destroy the law or the prophets. I am not come to destroy, but to fulfill. And unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you shall in no wise enter the kingdom of heaven. So I was trying to, Rabbi, Jesus is teaching the Torah, and he's saying, you have to keep the Torah even better than the scribes and the Pharisees. And he's not destroying it. So I was trying to build common ground with him because I really love this rabbi. I mean, he was like my my best friend. As my best Jewish friend, I suppose. And we were close, and I didn't want to. I wanted to keep studying with him. I didn't want him to throw me out. So I was trying to build that common ground, and eventually we got around to talking about the Book of Mormon, and that was very unfamiliar to him. But he wasn't opposed to reading other books, or he was quite modern in that way. But he just, his answer to me was, he's like, I can't change what you believe, and we really can't know for sure who the Messiah is. And so we had that classic conversation of, when the Messiah comes. And, he said very briefly, you and me, we'll ask the Messiah when he comes, if it's his first time or second time coming. And he says, if it's his first time coming, then I'm right. And if it's his second time coming, then you're right. But what does that mean for now? And he was very clear, you were born as a Jew, and that means something. You can't deny that. You can't get around that. It's who you are. Even if you wanted to live in a fantasy land, you're born a Jew. And that means that you're obligated to Mount Sinai, to the Torah. Your ancestors and you were there at Mount Sinai, and you already made a promise to God at Mount Sinai. And we have a chapter in the Burning Book, Neither With You Only, where we talk about that and what it means to carry Sinai from generation to generation. And that's what the rabbi told me. And he said, you're going to believe whatever you're going to believe, but you have a decision to make if you're going to be true to the covenant you and your ancestors made with the Torah. And I said, I get that, and that's what I want, and that's why I'm studying with you, and I'm trying to figure it out. And so we kept studying, and this modern Orthodox rabbi was building Jewish identity in me, and building commitment to Jewish covenant with me. So you're probably wondering, well, how did you get baptized then? How did you? I don't know where you're at, Rick, but
Yeah, it sounds like you had a lot of pressure.
Yeah, so that's where I'm at all my high school years. Is I'm really a very religiously troubled teenager. So yeah, I'll end there. See where you're at in your tracking of the story.
Well, I will just say that every rabbi, I haven't met a ton of rabbis, but every rabbi I've met has been super cool, and they're just so smart. I just love talking to him. And I'll just share a quick story on my mission. My companion and I, we're in South Carolina, so it's the Bible Belt. And for some reason, he said, hey,
Yeah.
it's December. It would be fun to go to Jewish synagogue on Friday night because, well, we didn't even know that they met on Friday night. We figured it was on Saturday. We called on Friday to see when the service was, expecting him to say it was on Saturday. And he goes, oh, it's at 7 o'clock tonight, which was in like an hour or something. And we're going to be talking about Jesus. And he said, the rabbi said to my companion, it would be great to have two of his representatives here at the synagogue.
Wow.
And so we went. The rabbi, I'm telling you, one of the coolest people I've ever met. And we kept going for like 2 or 3 weeks. And he told us later that some of his, do you call it a congregation, synagogue, whatever? They were like, we don't want, if we wanted to learn about Christ, we would be Christians. We're Jews. We don't care about Christ. And he was kind of giving a thing, well, it's Christmas time. I'm going to talk about Jesus. And then we just happened to be there the same day. But I have on my bookshelf somewhere a prayer book that he gave me that I thought was really cool. And he was really, really super nice. One of the nicest people I have ever met. So so I can understand why you'd want to study with them because they were just like I said.
Yeah.
One of my favorite scholars is Rabbi David Wolpe from Los Angeles. That guy is just brilliant, and there's so much we can learn from our Jewish. I'm going to say cousins. I like to talk about Mormon cousins, but my Jewish cousins too, because we all go back to Abraham, right?
Well, absolutely. I mean, that's the, I mean, and I was learning truth from this rabbi. Mm-hmm. So, and I enjoyed it, and it filled my soul, and I didn't want to give that up. I mean, so yeah. I mean, it was good that I had a co-author in writing this because a lot of this story is very painful and full of grief. So, because I was so committed to a Jewish life, there's no doubt. I tried to be very clear about that, at least in the book. But I wanted to be Jewish, even though I had these secret beliefs in Jesus and the Book of Mormon.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Dr. Jason Olson. Remember, I'm going to be giving away a copy of the Burning Book. And so sign up to gospeltangents.com/contest, and you could win this copy of the book. In our next conversation, we're going to talk about his baptism and LDS mission.
Yeah, so I mean, that was the moment where I could get baptized. And I was, I had tied up my Jewish identity. I was still studying with the rabbi. I broke up with the Jewish girlfriend, and so I'm ready for something new. I'm ready for something radical.
Thanks for listening to Gospel Tangents. If you'd like to support me, please subscribe at gospeltangents.com or on patreon.com/gospeltangents, or you can watch entire videos at youtube.com/gospeltangents. I really can't do this without your support. I'd love to do it full time, and I need a lot more people that are willing to help me out. So I'd really appreciate that. So thanks again for listening, and don't forget to check out some of our other videos.